Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Decades with Joe E. Kramer.
It's 9 o'clock.
Hey everybody, this is Ivan from Men Without Hats. Hi everyone, this is Russell Hitchcock of Air Supply.
I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. I know you were right, believing for so long.
Hey everybody, it's Robert Mason from Warren.
Heaven isn't too far away. Closer to it every day.
And you're listening to Decades. You're listening to Decades. Let's all hang out with Joey Kramer on Decades.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
And this week's artist is, oh, my voice just went really high. This week's artist is Sam Reid of Glass Tiger. You remember them back in the 80s. They gave us a bunch of big hits, including I'm Still Searching. And what else do they have? They had Someday, which was a huge one. And, of course, they have this one, which went top 10 in the U.S., of course. They were big. Bryan Adams tells them on this. They have a new album called 31. We'll talk about that and more with Sam Reid from Glass Tiger. He will be in here next, and we will talk to Sam Reid for 1 hour. This is the Decades Artist Spotlight.
You take my breath away. It's here to stay. Oh, there's still so much for me to do, and I can't stop loving you. Oh, can this be true?
Kramer here. Let's get right to it.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight with Joe E. Kramer. This week's artist.
Tonight we have another Decades Artist Spotlight, and we are here with keyboardist, producer, songwriter, and founding member of the Canadian rock band Glass Tiger, Mr. Sam Reid is with us. How you doing, Sam?
Very good. Good. Great to chat with you, Kramer.
Hey, we talked about 5 years ago, and I know a lot's been happening since then, including, and I always say this to everybody I talk to, 30-some years you guys have been together. I mean, you look at that, and you've got to say, wow.
Well, certainly we've hit the wow factor as far as years. Yeah, we've 31 years measures back to the release of Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone. When you look at our whole history, including our club dates and everything, we're sitting almost close to 40. So yeah, it's been a few years.
So that makes it seem make it seem even older when you say 40 years.
I know, it's incredible. Believe me, it seems like it goes so fast, and it's hard to believe 3 decades goes by that quickly.
And I talk to a lot of bands, and everybody sees a lot of movies about bands and documentaries about bands, and you guys are a little different because a movie about Glass Tiger probably wouldn't be very exciting because you guys like each other.
Well, there's a lot of stories of bands that tolerate each other and they stay on the road, and it's a business, and that's they find a way to make it work. But you're right. I mean, we're just one of those bands that we've managed to keep the chemistry, between all of us, without getting each other's way and without it coming off the rails. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a little boring, but we still hang out. We made mention while we were on the road that some of the other bands that we tour with, we give each other space, and I think that helps a lot. But we often will text each other and say, "Hey, what are you doing for breakfast? And what are you doing for dinner? And let's get together." So it's good.
And you've been on tour with a lot of great bands. I mean, I know you were on tour with Journey back in the day. Did you open up for Ozzy Osbourne too? Did I read that somewhere?
No, we've never done a show with Ozzy, but we in our early years we were a professional opening band because we wanted to play for bigger audiences.
Okay.
So we did a great run with Journey in America. We also did Moody Blues and Cheap Trick and Meatloaf, and then in Europe we were Tina for over 3 months, and Roxette and that. So we've definitely worked with a lot of bands. It's been a lot of fun.
And, of course, the old story goes, and I know you've answered these questions a million times, but you started out as a band called Tokyo, and I know you got that name because you needed something to put on a ticket, and that was the gig you had with Culture Club, correct?
Yeah, that was after we had done 3 or 4 years sort of doing showcasing in clubs, and we were basically a bar band called Tokyo. We had a lot of interest from the record labels, but we hadn't clinched a deal yet. And then we got a new manager who had a very great connection with the road manager with Culture Club, and he got us an opening spot for 2 nights at a very famous venue, which is no longer a venue, at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. And that was it. That was the icing on the cake, and then we got a record deal shortly after that with Capitol.
And you hooked up with Jim Vallance, which, I mean, if you're going to record an album, your first album, I mean, he would be the guy that you would go to because he worked with, he got Bryan Adams really into the spotlight, who, of course, was on your first album.
Yeah, Jim was, as a result of getting signed to Capitol, Dean Cameron, who was the president at the time, was a big fan of Jim's and had obviously been aware of all of the hits he was writing with not only Bryan, but he's got a long string of hits with Aerosmith and 38 Special.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Ozzy Osbourne is another one, yeah. So Jim was just, originally approached to co-write some stuff with us.
Right.
And then turned into a production relationship, and he ended up producing our first 2 albums as well as co-writing.
And, you came out, and we talked about Bryan Adams was already a huge deal here in America. So when Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone came out, was that coincidental that was your first single and you had Bryan Adams on it? So when it went to radio, it was Glass Tiger with Bryan Adams, doing some backup on it.
Well, it certainly was a strong. We wrote that in Vancouver with Jim and brought it back to the record label. They flipped over it. They said, "Oh, this is the song that we wanted. This will be a single." And it was very casual the way Bryan got involved. He was here in Canada for our version of the Grammys is the Junos.
The Junos, right?
And while he was in Toronto, he said, "Listen, I really like that tune. Let me, throw a few lines on it and that's how it came about. It was really just quite casual, and then it became a big single for us, of course.
And, of course, America, as we always are here, we're fickle as anything. But, Thin Red Line had a bunch of great songs on it. Not all of them were hits here, but Someday, of course, that was just as big of a hit. Not on the charts, but as far as radio play went back in the late 80s, it was on the radio all the time here. And that probably became your signature song.
And we still get, through our social media, we still get a lot of fan response and people who will, who will snap a shot of their favorite radio station and it'll say, look at what I'm listening to. And it'll be Don't Forget Me and Someday, obviously the most popular ones. My Town, off our third album, gets some airplay down in America as well. So we definitely see that. But certainly Someday and Don't Forget Me were our signature pieces there.
And you were talking about your Juno Awards. You've won how many? 4 or 5? Five. Yeah. I know you got Single of the Year for Don't Forget Me. You got Album of the Year. You got Single of the Year for Someday. Entertainer of the Year. Most Promising Group of the Year. And you even actually got a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist, which is probably good that you didn't win because, as we know, anybody who gets Best New Artist in the American Grammys, something always bad happens to their career.
Well, that's the rumor. That's the kind of kiss of death to win that. And, it was just an honor as, Canadians to come down to and have a career down in America and get to tour and then be recognized because we were on the radar. We were thrilled, honestly. And that year we were up against Bruce Hornsby, and he was such a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And I remember chatting with him at the Grammys, and it was great. We met some incredible artists there, international artists there, and it was a wonderful experience.
And I always find it strange. Canada and America, we're so close together yet. Is it that hard to break through here? Because you were mammoth in Canada. You had 14 top 40 hits. You had 6 top 10. You had a number 1. Here in America, you had 2 top 10s. You had a couple. You had a few more that hit the top 40. But is it that difficult? We're so close, and yet I find a lot of Canadian bands have such a hard time sustaining stuff here in America.
Well, I think it's Canada for a much smaller population. We do pretty good on the international stage as far as getting artists out there, and
right.
We're well represented. So we're pretty happy about that, and being on the short list of Canadian bands that have made it into America and got a chance to tour. Like I said, we still have lots of fans. We're just excited this year because it's been a little while since we've been able to get down. It's a little more difficult to tour when you only have little one-off dates here and there.
Right.
But this year, we are coming down. We've got some shows coming up in Florida, which will be announced shortly, and one in New York. And we're hoping to expand that and get out there because we keep getting fan mail from folks, in Georgia and in Wisconsin. We believe it, like little trickles of here and there, and saying, when are you guys coming back here? So we hope to get the band back into at least a few more locations. And
I want to talk about your new album in just a bit, but I was talking, we were talking about the different success. Thin Red Line was a good album, but my favorite album was Simple Mission, the third one. I love Diamond Sun because I loved I'm Still Searching. That's a song I play on my show more than any other song that you guys have put out. I've just always loved that song. But Simple Mission was a great album. And, it didn't make much of an impact here, but again, it was a big success in Canada.
It was a multi-platinum record here in Canada.
Right.
And I think the biggest song off of Simple Mission, even though I think there's quite a wide spectrum, it tends to be, it was a heavier, more guitar-influenced record. But with the song My Town, which we had Rod Stewart sing with us, and that went out, and we toured in Europe in Scotland with Roxette, and that really went over. I think because of there's a slight Scottish tinge to that song, and it's definitely trickled out there. So Simple Mission is for most Americans, certainly they've found it through osmosis more than anything else, and it's over the years. It's sort of come out, but it's interesting that would be your favorite. It's certainly one of ours.
Yeah, that was my favorite. Simple Mission was my favorite. And again, I had it on vinyl because I grew up in the 80s. But and I'm Still Searching was always my favorite. It's a song I continuously play here on my show. When you look at your albums you had and your song, what's your favorite? I know that's probably hard to nail it down, but what is your favorite song to still go out there and perform?
Yeah, we sometimes we get asked, how do you feel playing Don't Forget Me for the 10,000th time? the audience makes it fresh. Certainly the energy, we feed off of that. So you don't get tired of playing your songs when you see people singing along, and that never gets old. But for me, from a personal point of view, it's a tie between Thin Red Line and a song called Worlds Crumble, which because I'm the keyboard player, I really love that. It reminded me of a bit of aggressive, a little bit of like a Queen ballad, and I love that track. It's fun to play, and it's a big ballad for live, so I enjoy that one.
And Thin Red Line, I remember the video with the I guess they were, when I first saw it, I thought they were soldiers. They weren't. They were like playing the bagpipes in the video.
Well, there's a full reenactment. We shot that video in England, and the director was named Storm Thorgerson, and he was responsible for a lot of the album covers for Pink Floyd. Very creative guy who's no longer with us now, but he'd done some amazing work, and it was like a mini movie set.
Right.
We had stunt horses, and we had battle reenactments, and then we had the pipers. Few of the frames, I think they've even got us wearing kilts in a few frames, so it's a bit of everything.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are on a Decades Artist Spotlight this week. Sam Reid from Glass Tiger. Had him on the show about 4 years ago or so. Always a great time talking to him. They have a new album called 31, which he talked a little bit about. We're going to get in more to 31 coming up after the break. Plus, there were 2 new songs on that album as well, and we're going to let you listen to those 2 songs, including the next one I believe we're going to play is... I got to turn my page here. My favorite, which we're going to play, is Way Your Family, but we're going to do Fire It Up after the break, so don't go anywhere. This is Decades, the Decades Artist Spotlight with Sam Reid of Glass Tiger. We'll be right back. Listen live everywhere in the world at theriverNEPA.com. Also, Decades with JoeEKramer.com. And, of course, the Radio Bold app for your iPhone or Android device. More of the Decades Artist Spotlight coming up next.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight.
Northeast PA's The River.
She's sitting staring out a window, trying to figure out just what to do. Oh, the last time that you gave her heart away, it came back broken in two. Like an old abandoned car, she parked it down off a lonely avenue. Oh, she forgot about it till the day she laid her eyes on you. And her heart said fire it up, and her soul said fire it up, and her mind said fire it up, and let love live again. He's sitting in the subway station, watching as the trains go flying by. He used to hate the black man, till a black man reached out and saved his life. Oh, he was pulled out of the darkness, rescued, blinded by the light. Oh, ain't it crazy how one simple act of kindness can open up your eyes, open up your eyes, to let your heart say fire it up, and let your soul say fire it up, and let your mind say fire it up, and let love live together, you and me, trying to figure out this world. Oh, we're searching for the reasons to believe what makes this big ball turn. But if we hold on to each other, give love, show love for all love's worth. Yeah, they might call us crazy, but tell me, who's it gonna hurt? Who's it gonna hurt? To let your heart say fire it up, and let your soul say fire it up, and let your mind say fire it up. Let love live again, and let your heart say fire it up, and let your soul say fire it up, and let your mind say fire it up. Let love live again.
It is the Decades Artist Spotlight. That is new music from Glass Tiger. Their album's called 31. Fire it up. Hope you like that one. Very cool stuff.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are on a Decades Artist Spotlight this week. Hey, welcome back to the show, Mr. Sam Reid of the Canadian rock band Glass Tiger. You have a new album out. It's called 31, and it came out, I believe, in February. And it has a story to it because we all know Alan had a little bit of some medical problems, which kind of opened the eyes of not only him but the rest of the members of the group.
Yeah, we were heading into our 30th, looking ahead for our 30th anniversary. We had been working on some new music. There was some chatter about, releasing something new for our 30th, and full steam ahead. And then all of a sudden, Alan threw a bit of a curveball at us and suffered a minor stroke, but enough that it was a wake-up call. And certainly, our first order of business was to make sure that he was going to be okay. So he had a very slow recovery, but he realized he had dodged a bullet, and he had a little bit of paralysis in his I think his right side, and then but the voice stayed good. In about a year worth of physio and recovery, he said, "Listen, guys, I'm good. I'm good to go." And when we looked at the timeline, we just basically said, "Listen, let's not chase the 30th. Let's just call it 31. Let's call it what it is. Everybody else can do 30. We'll do 31."
Right. And I've heard you guys say it's a musical celebration, this album.
Yeah, and so we had all these new songs, which actually in the sidelines here we are working on, and will come out later this year. But one of the fellow that produced this record is another Canadian, Scottish-born immigrant from Scotland here in Canada, very similar to Alan's story, and he wanted to produce a record with us, and he said to us, we want to celebrate all the things that mean when you had a stroke and a setback, the things that remind you that it's meaningful in your life, your friends and your family and brotherhood and all this stuff. So he said, these songs that you have, I'd love to work on them with you, reimagine them, because they're like old friends, and just give them, a new pair of shoes and bring them back in the door again. So that's how the record was formed, and we've had so much fun. It's not a greatest hits package. A lot of people might look at the song titles and say, "Oh, I know those songs," but you really have to listen to it because they've gone through what we call the campfire test, where
every song has been redone.
Stripped them down. We sat around the table with Johnny and his acoustic instruments, and we stripped them down right to their basics and built them up. We did a lot of the record was recorded in Nashville, and we had some wonderful guests join us, and the record has a completely different feel, but you'll know the songs, you'll know the melodies, and it was so much fun to make the record, and we trusted him because it would have been difficult for us to imagine this record without somebody on the outside looking in.
And of course, you're talking about Mr. Johnny Reid, who is himself a big Canadian artist, and you're going to be touring with him.
Well, that's the tour we're on right now. We have 45 shows in 60 days, so it's been a while since we've done that kind of a schedule. Johnny is he's a few years younger than us, so he's doing the touring that we used to do when we were in our 30s.
Right.
And when we finished the record, we were so proud of it. He said, "Listen, guys, I'm going out coast to coast in Canada, 45 shows. Why don't you jump on with me and let's do a little a showcase on the new album. You can get out there and do some press and talk about it and sing some songs." So we are about 37 shows into the 45 right now, and we're on the home front heading east into the eastern Canada now.
So how does it feel like to be on a big tour again? Is it?
It's great. So one of the things that you get from a big tour, and this reminds me of the days that we had with Journey and the big tours we did with Tina and with Journey, is there's a real synergy you get when you're working with the same people each day as you roll into each town. So I love the consistency with that. I mean, instead of every day being a challenge to set up differently, you get to go in there, and it's a great way to polish a show and work and get a real solid team together. So it's quite different than doing one-off shows.
Now, there were two songs on here on the 31. Fire It Up, was that one of his songs, Johnny Reid's songs?
Yeah, so we were looking at material that we felt would resonate for this theme that we wanted, and Alan and Johnny wrote a song called Fire It Up, which ended up on Johnny's record here in Canada and became a hit. And then it got picked up by Joe Cocker, and Joe Cocker's final tour that he did in Europe was called Fire It Up, and Joe made it a hit in Europe. And that was a song that Alan and Johnny Reid wrote together. And Glass Tiger, of course, had never done it. So we said, listen, we should do a version of this song. So that's how that ended up on the record. And so that was an easy fit. And then we wrote, I wrote a Celtic piece called Way Your Family.
That's the one I like.
Meaning, yeah, it means with your family.
I really like that.
Yeah. So you need a translator a little bit on that, especially when you hear Johnny or Alan say in their Scottish twang. But it was a song that was written a few years ago for a little Celtic project that I was working on. It didn't get finished, but I was really loved that piece. And when we were talking about family and brotherhood and all the things important in your life, I played the song for Johnny, and I reminded Alan that we had this sitting in the sidelines. And that's how that one, Johnny first heard it and said, I love that piece. I think that fits. We got to do that.
And I heard that Scottish sound, and I didn't know that Johnny Reid was actually from Scotland when I heard it. And then when I went back and I looked at it, I'm thinking, oh, there's the sound. That's that. But Glass Tiger always had that type of sound.
Well, Alan and Johnny's stories are quite similar.
Right.
I mean, Alan came to Canada when he was a teenager.
Right.
From Scotland, immigrated with his family. Johnny, exactly the same thing. And it just, there's some years apart, but their stories are quite similar. And the fact that two of them ended up being singers is one thing. And so it's, when you're in a room with the two of them, I have to look to see who's speaking.
Now, I know years ago when we talked, you also have your own recording studio. Is that still something that you're doing, Willow Music?
I made some changes. I had a commercial recording studio for about 7 years.
Right.
Loved it, and it was great to work with some up-and-coming artists. I've now since left the commercial studio, and but I moved all of my gear into a brand new studio I created in my home, very similar to the setup that Johnny has in Nashville. So that when we do these projects, a good chunk of the project, especially the writing and pre-production stage, I can do here in my home studio. So all my gear is now back in another studio space, but I'll always have a studio.
Because I remember us talking about the Sanctuary series.
Yeah, that's something that I did in the in the late '80s or early '90s, actually through the '90s mostly, and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's still out there. I still get I get playlists. I get lists of streaming numbers, and then I see it, and it's out in Australia and places like that. So I still have that going. I haven't released anything new in a while, but this new studio I have, I think, is going to give me some incentive to add some titles to that series as well.
And I know you touched on it a little before. It's been a long time since we've got in 31, you've reworked the classics, but it's been how many years since we've heard a brand new Glass Tiger album?
Well, the last studio album was Simple Mission.
Right, and that was 1991.
91, we toured it till almost 94, and then we took a little break. So there's been a couple of greatest hits packages, because what happens with record labels, of course, when you take a little hiatus, take a break, they will tend to put out, especially if you have a lot of catalog, they'll tend to repackage and put singles out in a different way and whatever.
Right.
So we have no control over that, and that was fine. They put things out. And occasionally we had added an extra song, a new song on a couple of those greatest hits packages. But as far as a full-on studio album with all new material, yeah, it's been since '91, and that's what we're working on right now. We allowed this 31 project because of the situation with Alan and because of what the messaging was. We allowed this to happen first in priority, and now we're currently in pre-production for the new stuff. So there's a new album on the way. So give me a little hint. Is it going to sound like classic Glass Tiger, or have you changed anything? Well, we're older now, so there's certainly a different, more mature sound. Nobody wants to make the same record they made, 30 years ago. 30 years, right? So it's always going to be different in some way, but I guarantee you there's a thread of Glass Tiger through everything new. And of course, when you hear Alan's voice on it, that's the thread that kind of glues it all together. So they'll definitely be that. We've really loved doing, adding. We've always had a little bit of the Celtic thing. I mean, even if you listen to the song My Song we did with the Chieftains, so the Celtic acoustic vibe is never far from our hearts. So there'll be a tinge of that on there as well. And I got a thing for acoustic songs. I was very excited when I first heard the new version of Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone, and it started out with that acoustic vibe. I just love when songs are broken down and they're played on it. They're played so simple. just to have it. No, we don't need to record the same version that we did it.
Right.
And we wanted to give all these songs a different feel. We call it the campfire test when you take a song and you break it down to its lowest common denominator, and if it still sticks together and it sings well and feels great, that's the rule of a good song. So it was so much fun to do the songs in a different light, and certainly something as recognizable as Don't Forget Me.
So finally, I mean, you got the tours wrapping up. I know this tour is wrapping up at the end of April. You've got the new album that you're working on. What's next? I mean, through the summer, are you going to be you're going to be doing some dates during the summer? You were saying earlier, possibly down here in the States.
Yeah, so we have quite a busy summer. Is a busy time for us because we have a festival season here in Canada, and we're delighted. Going into the fall, I believe, is the time frame that we're coming down. We're going to be adding a New York date soon to be announced, and then I know there's 3 dates coming up in Florida for sure, and that'll be heading into early fall. And then going on from that, we're hoping to add some more markets in the U.S. and get down there again. And
the last time I saw Glass Tiger live was, I think it was with Journey. It was the Raised on Radio tour. I think.
Wow, so that was
the one.
That's 1987.
Yeah,
right?
I was still in high school, and I went.
It's funny enough. And I heard a rumor that Steve Perry's going out again on the road. I don't know if that's true, but that would be delightful.
With Journey or without Journey, that's always the case.
I know.
Because I think that would be a stadium tour if he rejoined Steve. Nothing against the guy who's in there now. He has a great voice. But if Steve Perry got together with Journey, that would be a stadium tour.
Absolutely. And we'd be there in a heartbeat to open that again.
Without a doubt. Hey, we're on a Decades Artist Spotlight. From Glass Tiger, Mr. Sam Reid is here. Sam, thanks so much for talking to us again.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Hi, it's Sam Reid from Glass Tiger, and you're listening to Decades with Joey Kramer.
Life spoke of simple things. Stick or a stone, I know football. A shoe laced up with string. In a second-hand world of joy. With your own ones through the noise. In our wee house filled with kith and kin. How we would laugh, how we would sing.
Let's raise a glass to those we love. So here's to you and yours and my boy, for they are mine and all that I have got. That's the way life should be. We're your family.
is the Decades Artist Spotlight. That is, of course, Sam Reid and Glass Tiger.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We're on the Decades Artist Spotlight. Glass Tiger, Sam Reid. Founder, writes a lot of their songs, and of course, 31 is their new album, Way Your Family. Very cool stuff with Johnny Reid on that one, and it's a really cool album. All the songs that you love by Glass Tiger redone, whether they be acoustic or just a different kind of vibe. So you might want to check that out. Actually, you do want to check that out. Available everywhere that you get your music. Can't say at a local record store because they're few and far between anymore. Although nothing like the smell of vinyl. I'll leave it at that. Our next Decades Artist Spotlight will be coming up in July. And we have a couple here. Tony Lewis from the Outfield, who has some solo stuff out. Jerry Buckner will be joining us on the show. So stay with us for more spotlights coming up. Meanwhile, after 10 o'clock, it is the Singing with the Sam. And that'll happen around 10:15. Plus, we'll do some trivia, of course. I think I'm going to stick to one specific movie or show this time around. So we'll do that after 10 o'clock. Right here, it is Decades on the River 105 and 103.5 around the world at the rivernepa.com. Decades with joeekramer.com and the Radio Bolt app free for your iPhone or Android device. More Decades coming up. Hang on.